The growing season is really full this time of year. It's been hard to make time to step aside and actually document what's going on. But I'm taking a little moment here in the evening before the sun sets, before dinner, and after a nice long day of hilling potatoes and other field work to look at this area behind me. I'm going to link here to the original video of this. This was actually installed in a few hours, predominantly in a few hours, in I think April of 2020, right at the beginning of COVID of all things. This is one of the results of how we reacted to that whole thing, whatever that was. But I want to talk about that a few years later, how our food forest, our instant food forest from cuttings, how is it evolving? How is it thriving? Is it? It is. It's ridiculous. This is about 1/10 of an acre. It's going to be hard to kind of get a sense of things because it is so incredibly dense in there. We fenced this off. This is the summer run extension for our chickens. If I can find a video talking about that aspect of the design, I'll link to it here. You can see the simple 4-foot high 2x4 welded wire fencing and metal T-posts. So we're on our neighbor's lawn here. This was a mowed lawn back in 2020. And then we installed on the inside rows of elderberry, of willow, of elderberry, of different varieties of currants. We've since added more complexity and more diversity into that. But basically, more or less all of the shrubs and trees you're seeing in here did not exist in this landscape before April of 2020. So this was a mowed lawn. I need to say that a few times to have that really actually absorbed. Some of this was added later on, like this elderberry, this autumn olive. The honeyberries on the outside of the fence weren't even added until 2022, I believe. So it's a great reminder of just how fast things can happen. Our initial budget for this installation project was $0. We didn't put in the fencing at first. It was generated entirely by cuttings that Juan and I stuck in. And the management in here is actually simplifying in a great way, and the chickens are loving it. Right now I'm on the southern end here where we've made a little simple gate for ourselves to come and go. We maintain this from a few different spots. This is the main way that we come and go. It's grown so immensely it's actually hard to even get into here. It's a little tunnel mainly for the chickens, but we can get in there too. Let me pop in and take a look. If you don't care about the look of it, you can get away with a gate just being the wire of the fence with a little hook on top. When you want to close it, you stretch it and hook it. And that is fine enough, just in case folks want to do it on the scrappy style. But anyway, so it is growing in here. Part of what I think is fueling the intensity of growth is a few things. One, we have the overflow of our pond being directed through here. It's invisible now, but there's actually a little pipe that goes from upslope to where the pond is and dumps into here in between these two rows of willows. So when we have immense pulse rain events, water can flow through this ditch. I don't know if you can even sense it, but it's in here, right in here, and it goes between the two rows of willows. So they are the predominant overstory character, and that design has seemed to translate into some pretty immense growth for just 3 years of active growing, entering into the 4th. I think that's the way this works. There's over 20-foot tall trees in here now because of the excess water for the willow. And the elderberries don't mind either. So right in front of me is Scotia. Right now it is coming into peak flower, so it should be an immensely wonderful flow of nectar and honey for both local native pollinators as well as the non-native European bees, the honeybees that are around and about. I've actually pruned this quite a bit, significantly, in order to even get through here. All this green growth is from some pretty heavy-duty cuts that happened in the spring. I've talked about that recently and pruning elderberry and how to make that work, how we work with that. In this area, we need to prune pretty intensively in order to keep the diversity up, because right now the elderberry is growing with such ferocity, absolute like extreme pump of elderberry through here. And just to the west of them is a row of white currants, and they're actually staying a little bit smaller and a little bit held back because of the immensity of the elders. So I pretty much anytime I'm coming in here, I'm bringing pruners. It's like, okay, I'm losing out on being able to harvest flowers or fruit by doing this from the elderberry, but I'm chopping and dropping the elder to feed the currants because they need that. They're a little bit less potent and intense in their ability to grow than the elderberries. We actually need to find some folks locally that are interested in harvesting elderflower to dry for medicine, ideally for like community use. So if you're really close to the Ithaca area and it's a really straightforward and wonderful thing for you to harvest elderberry flower, you know what to do with them, and you want to share them with folks in need, give us a holler, because we don't need all these flowers for us. We'll harvest some for making red currant and black currant wine. We'll use the elderflower as the yeast source, but there's more in here than we need, and it's pretty wonderful to see how much is going on in this little spot. The white currants in this area are putting on a decent crop. Again, I think they could use a little bit more of a canopy release. I'm starting to get more and more comfortable with going a little bit harder with the chop and drop, but we could do well after this season to take every other Scotian here and just chop them and feed them to these white currants and really do a hard reset. I talked about the idea of coppicing elderberry after a few years. I think after this season, every other one we can do that, and it'll allow a lot more light in, a lot more vibrancy, and a little bit more diversity. I can see these white currants disappearing if we don't intervene. Like this alder showed up, and it just loves what's going on, all the wetness, all the sun, all the fertility, and so I got to come in here, just keep on, chop and drop. It's ruthless, unending, wonderful work of nutrient cycling with these systems. Like, you really have to have pruners in your pocket all the time if you're going to try to increase the total woody mass in a landscape this immensely without much space. We've completely quit mowing in here at all. I mean, I guess you can tell. This is where the chickens browse, and they actually, a lot of them come out here right away in the mornings. And something I learned for myself this year, maybe I'll document this in more thorough detail if there's interest. This is like some chaos theory stuff, and it's somehow working out really well. As we prune woody plants that are in our more curated home garden space, so back over here is where we're doing our food forest on quote-unquote our side. This is where we originally were starting. So there's a fair bit of woody material to prune off. Old elders, trimming up currants, old dead trees, what have you. I just literally lob it over the fence and into this area all winter, all early spring. And what that does is it puts enough physical complexity on the ground, all of this insane woodiness everywhere. Like, we've cut down this alder in our backyard. I just lobbed everything over, threw all of it into this area. The chickens can't scratch apart the soil, and so there's just this like intense amount of vegetation in here. I think if we had another layer of design in here where we introduce sheep or goats or something along that line that could also graze this, the nutrient cycling in here would just be astronomical. But as it stands, woody debris thrown all throughout. It makes it hard to walk through here, but we only have to walk through here once in a while to come and harvest currants or elderberry. It's not like we're coming in here for a lettuce crop or like an annual, CSA farm or something. So this is almost entirely for the chickens and for the wildlife and for soil restoration and carbon sequestration and nitrogen deposition and the like, nectar flow for wild creatures, etc. And so tons of chaff and debris, letting everything grow like a riot, and then once in a while coming through with a scythe, harvesting what we need. Actually works really beautifully. Very, very low maintenance. This year, so we're in early June, we're coming into the second week of June. Growing season is absolutely well underway. The only work I've done in here so far was throwing debris over. You can kind of see watching my step through here. So if you needed really intimate and careful, detailed access in a space that chickens are grazing, a food forest that chickens are grazing, maybe what I'm describing makes no sense, but this is basically bonus territory for them. Harvest of flowers, harvest of fruit if we want it. We have no need to market this fruit. That literally costs $0 to establish this. So there's no financial pressure to create a money system out of that. So whether we cycle these back in for biomass to feed currants, we leave them for wildlife, anywhere in between, it all works really well. This sort of system becomes like a zone 4-ish in the permaculture zones of use mentality. In other words, borderline completely feral, although actually established and created through human design, but but allowed to be released to the wild with domesticated animals running through it. Somehow that quality of impact has created this space where birds love it in here, insects do well in here, and the chickens seem quite happy throughout the days. I think the moral of the story for a space like this is, if you can, put a bunch of cuttings of awesome stuff in lines as tight as you can in a lawn and quit mowing it and let animals go in there, and then throw a bunch of debris around and let all of the herbaceous layer get absolutely wild in there, and then at some point cut stuff that's getting too big for the smaller stuff that you care about that's a little more fragile, and take the big chopped stuff and feed the small fragile stuff, and you've got, is it syntropic agriculture? Maybe not. Probably not. There's a lot more nuance, I'm sure, in a lot of those design systems, but we do not need to feed this system anymore. All of the nutrients can be cycled right through here. And it was $0 and 4 years. There's so much more in here to explore. On the south end, we've since added in some more diversity in the form of gumi. We want to keep propagating these autumn olive cousins. They are not ripe yet, but we figured this would be a lovely fruit for the chickens to enjoy. There's some new varieties of variegated willow that we added in. There are sunchokes and perennial sunflowers that have been added in. I even took some peach pits and stuck them in the ground early on and put some rocks around them so the chickens couldn't scratch the pits out. So that's some pretty high-tech peach planting right there. So a lot more layers being added in over time, but the foundation works pretty well. Really starting to move towards jungle vibes. For a cold, temperate climate, the amount of verdant abundance in here is pretty intense. And some of the things that I think are pretty deeply compelling here is Miabina willow. So this was a willow that was growing just as tall as the one behind. We harvested an immense amount of dormant cuttings for shipping for people to propagate themselves. I realize I'm distracted a little bit right now because I'm looking at what I wanted to talk about, which is that lady right there, the little bird. The regrowth in here this year was such that it made the right conditions for a bird to create a nest in here. I'm going to only take a few more seconds just to show that. It's really wonderful to see. Pollarding and coppicing, the extreme density model, begets context that's really compelling for small birds to create nests. I've seen that over and over again with European buckthorn and quote-unquote invasives, and then also with willows that are both native and non-native. But that sort of management regime of really high intensity cutting and regrowth and density and green is awesome for birds. And I'm going to get out of the way so she can get back to her nest. Sorry, Miss Lady. This is your home. It's funny, it's like I set up these systems, we set things in motion that are quote-unquote our systems, and then wildlife show up and they find that it's useful for their needs, and they set up shop and they build their homes and they have their children, and it's their place too. It's their place in their minds way more than it's ours, and it's all correct. So it's everybody's spot. It's fun to be in a space like this that's running past our management just a little bit and turning into a space for wildlife to feel at home. That's enough for this evening. I should probably go in and check in with Sasha on things. Some point soon we're going to finish up a video. She made a video talking about starting dandelion wine. You can kind of tell how far behind we are on sharing this kind of stuff. It's way past dandelion season, but we'll finish up that video soon and share that. Lots of nice sweet shots of Sasha and Zelda working together. But here is this pretty wonderful jungle a few years in. Let me know in the comments what sort of questions you have or things you'd like to see in here. I realize this has become a true chicken scene. Like, I don't go through those spaces much at all. This is for everybody other than us at a certain point, and boy, what a wonderful ego busting way to operate in the system.